можете перевірити, чи... О, я бачу, що щось з'явилось, якісь строки. Microphone? Hello. Yeah. Sorry for delay. So I'm happy to welcome all of you here. My name is Oksana Mamchenkova. I'm Kyiv-based project coordinator for the Europe-Ukraine desk, which is a project by n-ost. We launched this project 2 years ago exactly, and now we're having our like one of our Kyiv Media Hub events, which is a networking professional event for journalists from Ukraine and from abroad who are covering Ukraine, and usually we are discussing topics related to usually we are discussing topics related to the coverage of the war. So today we are having an event dedicated to the 11th years of the war. We are approaching to this another dreadful anniversary. And we are having here people who are covering this war either since 2014 or since a bit later. And we are having as a moderator today Angelina Kariakina, who is a journalist herself. Also, she is a founder of public interest journalism lab. She is also in board of public broadcaster and an advisor for Ukrainian public broadcaster. So I will give the stage to her and to our speakers. She will introduce all other speakers. We will have around 1 hour for this moderated part of the discussion. Then we will have around half an hour for the questions from our guests.
Thank you so much, Oksana, and thanks everyone for being this night together with us, not only because it's Valentine's Day, but also because we all journalists can imagine how much work it is for all of us. And we have this unique opportunity to see each other. Probably it's a very rare occasion. So on one hand, it's a good opportunity for us just to talk and to reflect on something that we normally do not have any opportunity. On the other hand, of course, we want to be useful for you, and we'd like you to take this chance to ask all of the possible questions you have about the coverage of the war in Ukraine and maybe abroad. We will be happy to reflect on that and to discuss that as well. So it is my pleasure and my honor to introduce my colleagues, Stas Kozliuk, all of them journalists, photographers, multimedia journalists covering Ukraine, covering war in Ukraine, Russian aggression for many years. It's 11 years since the Russian invasion. Stas Kozliuk, Mykhailo Shtekel, Varenytsia, and Oksana Johannesson. Anastasia Vlasova will be joining us shortly. I'd like to start with a question for all of us to reflect on the level and of the quality of coverage of this war since 2014. You all have been in this profession for quite some time now. You've been covering Russian aggression for many years. Of course, full-scale invasion has brought absolutely new challenges for all of us, both personally and professionally. But how would you describe the level and the quality of war journalism in Ukraine right now as a domestic, let's say, case, and abroad as well? So any one of you who would like to start first? Or we'll just go, okay, Ina, thanks.
Does it work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So for me personally, I started to cover war in 2014, and I'd rather say that the war started not in spring, but before, when Maidan ended up, and then Russia annexed Crimea. And by that time, I was in Kharkiv, covering Kharkiv, and living there. And what I can say is that before we didn't have such an experience of war coverage, and there were no such a school of war coverage in Ukraine. That's for Ukrainian community. And from the other side, the society abroad didn't take the war in Ukraine so seriously like the society abroad takes it seriously right now. And even we know that colleagues abroad, some of them thought that it's a civil war, which was not, it was a hybrid war. Of course, because of scale of invasion, in 2022, we had much more media here. But then, by the end of 2022, there were less and less journalists, and it happens in each war. I also used to work in Iraq, and I can compare that in the beginning of Mosul offensive operation, there were more journalists, and then the quantity of them reduced, and only those who can make much deeper stories, they stayed in the country and continued to cover. And the same we see in Ukraine as well, that only on some big dates we can see here more journalists, and only some who can work on deeper projects, who can highlight the deeper story or give some analysis, they stay and work here. For Ukrainians and Ukrainian media, our media also learn how to make deeper story. And before the war in 2014, we had more spotty coverage without explanation, what it seems. Like, for example, drone hit there. Now, many colleagues are trying to explain not only spots, but how the changes on the war field, or how the changes in political field will affect our society.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Misha?
Yeah, I will continue. First of all, I think I should say that war since 2014 was a very big challenge for Ukrainian journalists and for me personally. We had to deal with problems majority of us didn't cover before, and we had to study from the scratch. Because if we are speaking about the quality of coverage, I will agree with Inna that the quantity is bigger on some big dates. We are going to have the 3rd anniversary of the full scale, and I think that lots of journalists will come here to make some big stories. But generally, the quality depends on the demand, actually, from the media, both in Ukraine and in the world. And in Ukraine, since 2014, the demand was different. We all know that in 2014, 2015, the demand was bigger. And after that, we had a slight decline of the demand of the coverage of the war. However, those who did that all the time, starting 2014, had to inevitably make their coverage better. I mean, when you're into the problem for like 10 years, you will become an expert in that problem no matter what. And it was a big surprise for me when foreign journalists started coming in 2022. And maybe not me personally, but some of my colleagues were discovering for those hardened veterans of journalism all over the world. They were studying from my colleagues how to behave, how to cover, what some things mean, what matters and what doesn't matter. And the process still continues, both the studying from Ukrainian journalists and the process of actually the war is going on, and we all have to do something to cover that somehow.
Thank you. Yes, sure, go ahead.
Sorry. What I would like to add also is that we are, as Ukrainian journalists and with some foreign colleagues, we are trying to explain the difference between Ukrainian and Russian history, because it shows the roots of the problem, because it shows the effect, the influence of Russian Empire, and why Ukrainians are fighting against Russians, and that it's Russian aggression, not Ukrainian aggression. Somehow it's not on Ukrainians to stop the war. And we are trying to explain even more now some cultural aspects, like even tiny or the bigger historical questions, like, I don't know, borscht is Ukrainian. Or as for artists, who were Ukrainians, who were Russians, or Sikorsky, who developed helicopter, he was Ukrainian, and so on.
Thanks so much, Stas.
Maybe the first thing, it's about Ukrainian journalists. We haven't experienced like that before 2014 because we haven't war in Ukraine. And we have really little numbers of colleagues that covering the wars like Afghanistan or Chechnya or some of them Yugoslavia. And we have to learn on the field. It was a strange time because, you know, I'm used to be a court journalist. I cover in the courts. But in 2014, I started covering the war. And I spent on that war 11 years already. And I saw that a lot of colleagues understand how to make the stories about the war, about the soldiers, about civilians. And the main thing that journalism, it's not about, you know, telling that you saw. It's about the contexts. You have to explain what's going on. And I saw that some foreign colleagues didn't understand it, because they believed, for example, in the start of from the full-scale invasion, that if Russia kills Zelensky, the war will be, you know, we will have the end of the war. But that's not true. And we spoke with a lot of people on the streets, and they asked them, if Russia kills Zelensky, will you stop fighting? And I think you will see that faces of people on the streets, that they don't understand that question, because we are fighting not for Zelensky, we are fighting for our freedom, for our relatives, for our homes, for our land. And that's hard to explain. Another problem that I saw, that a lot of colleagues of mine, foreign colleagues of mine, they have a lot of experience from the war around the world. But we have the war that you can compare maybe, I don't know, the World War II with that. And they didn't understand the risks, they didn't understand the problems. Because, for example, some foreign colleagues don't understand why they can't go to the front line, why they can go right now, especially, to the trenches. And you try to explain them that the main problem is your security and security of the soldiers. Because 15 kilometers from the 0 point, from the front line, it's the dead zone. Every car, every man that's moving on that territory will be killed by drones. They don't understand what's the risks about the drones, like the personal view drones. And you try to explain them that's the huge risk, and you have to understand that that's not because of Ukrainian soldiers try to, you know, block your journalism or try to fight with freedom of speech. No, that means, you know, that's the story about your security. And the war changed from the 2014, to be honest. From the 2022, to be honest, yeah.
Absolutely, thank you, Stas. I'd like to notice that we have our colleague Anastasia Vlasova joining us. Hi, and thank you so much for being with us. We are reflecting on a question about the level and quality of war coverage since 2014. What has changed and what is different, in our opinion? Oksana, please.
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues, but I would just add that definitely the Ukrainian journalism quality increased a lot, because looking back at 2014, I feel that the focus was mostly on the frontline coverage only. And then in 2016, after the Minsk agreements, society largely lost interest in the in the war if they're not from this region. But now the intensity of this war, the reality that we live for the last 3 years, it definitely pushed for digging deeper into new topics. You just need to look for the new aspects of the war to work on, and diversity of these topics. And that's how the war journalism really got shaped. I believe that's the main difference.
Yes, before handing mic to Anastasia, I would maybe also add another part of my question. It's about the access to the occupied territories. In 2014 and even in 2015, shortly, we, not the majority of us, but we Ukrainian journalists and foreign media did have a little access to the temporarily occupied territories. Even in Crimea, we could cross the Ukrainian border and we could still get at least a little part of the picture what is happening there. It became absolutely impossible since 2022. We have no access, and the majority of foreign media has no access to Ukraine, to the Russia-occupied territories, Ukrainian territories. Nastya, before you,
I just want to
maybe
this,
Oksana,
yeah.
and every one of you have something to how this fact that we have no access and the world basically has no access
I just
changed
want
the
to
coverage.
add, because I'm from Lugansk, the most controversial region, the most eastern city in Ukraine, and I was there from day one when the occupation started, when it was still not so vivid, when there was anti-Ukrainian demonstrations, which is so weird to say in Ukraine, anti-Ukrainian demonstration. And I just was visiting my parents after the Maidan was over, and we felt like that's victory, that's some change. I was visiting my parents with the camera, and here you are, I'm already filming historical events. And yes, after it started, I left in April, and I never got back. 10 years and never been to Lugansk. Even my dad, he kept going back and forth until 2018, but I was never going there because it was simply dangerous. If you take the posts on social media, the work, of course, we all knew that maybe you can then never leave. And you absolutely have no enforcement of law there. You're absolutely hopeless. So yeah, still never visited, left, never packed the stuff, never packed the things, and never got back.
Thank you. Yes, Nastya, how the fact that we basically have no access changes the level of our coverage?
Well, I think, obviously that changes not the level of coverage, but that changes the way we are used to take the information, right? Like, it used to be like we have two sides of conflict, and we represent both of them. And basically, everything changed since this war. And how we take objectivity also changed, because now we understand clearly that it's not about only Ukrainian journalists not having access to the other side. When even American journalists from the Wall Street Journal, I'm talking about Evan Gershkovich, get detained in Russia for trying to speak critically about them. I think this is what else can we add here, and what else can we and what else do we need to prove here in terms of that we just cannot have access to the other side, and if we do, then in what terms it's going to happen? Because I mean, obviously we've all seen this documentary by what his name was. But anyway, I think, we all understand. And I mean, obviously...
It's the BBC documentary. Yes.
And I mean, obviously, it is I mean, I'm not saying that the guy is like neutral, and I mean, also what is neutral? The meaning of neutrality also changed, because now those who are saying that they're neutral usually appear to be supporting the other side, you see. And basically, like with this journalist, this beat that leaked with him saying all this like Russia propaganda, that he supports it. And I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking that he might not be thinking like that, but what else is he supposed to say to these guys, yeah, to keep working with them, you see? Obviously, he's not going to be, like, if he's pro-Ukrainian, if he is, like, not into Russian propaganda, like, how do you imagine him filming them and being, like, you know, educating them, teaching them, and, I mean, obviously, he will not be the popular person and might end up in the basement. So it's not, you see, it's about not even being able to tell to the other side this, you know...
to ask a question, like a simple question.
And if you're not supporting their side, and if you're not showing openly that you support their side, they're not going to give you access, and at least, and they might even like execute you if you are Ukrainian journalists, especially what we all learned on the dramatic cases. But what I was saying is that also why it's never going to be the same, it's because the battlefield changed because of the drones, which Stas had mentioned, and also, of course, that affects the way we can portray this war. And I mean, all these movies that we as journalists basically grew up on, like War Photographer, like, you know, all this, you know, old school films where they are sitting in the trenches together with the soldiers. I mean, it's never going to be like it's not the way that war is going to be shown from now because of the drones, because it's a game changer. And I think that we should also understand that and take that into the way of our work. Changes, and we should also not be, you know, well, basically implementing this new weapon into our work, and understanding that all these patterns of the that we used in our work before, they're not going to be possible like now, because it's not the same war.
Absolutely. I just wanted to add that in our case, since 2022, we don't have to go to the trenches to cover the war. We basically can stay in our apartments, like Oksana's apartment that got shelled quite recently in the Kiev downtown, or other cases. So it's the war, and the way this war unfolds is in all the ways is an absolutely huge, full-scale story on different levels. But let me go quickly back. Yes, Ina, you had something. Yeah.
In terms of work in occupation, and I can compare because I worked for 3 years in occupied Donetsk and Lugansk. I was born in Lugansk region, but then I moved to Kharkiv. But for me, it was something that I felt that I want to understand my roots. I want to understand people from the territory. And I used to work for Ukrainian media first months, but then I've got accreditation with big foreign media, one of the biggest. And that was kind of protection for me. And because it was a hybrid war, it was possible to cover something there. And I can compare how censorship changed during years. In 2014, there were less people from Russian side who controlled the area, but when there were less and less fightings, they controlled more and more this area. The freedom, like the space became too tight. You were too visible, and they started to check materials. They put us to blacklist. I was on this blacklist 3 times. Luckily, I was not detained. But also I worked for Ukrainian media when Ukrainian media were banned on occupied territories. And if they would find it out, that would be bad for me, definitely. And it was possible to do less and less stories. And sometimes I even worked only as a camera person. And you know that many media do not put name of camera person on the footage. It's kind of guarantee, and from another side, it's not a kind of guarantee, because like you do not exist, and you do not exist like a professional, and that's a problem. And another thing that from the other side, I wanted our Ukrainian, what was motivation for me? I wanted our Ukrainian people to see people on the other side because it's the same country. And for me, I always was interested in motivation, why people are doing this. And that's why I wanted to give the voice for those who stayed on occupied territories unless it was possible for me. Sometimes I helped to make research, and then we worked on complicated stories, on stories about business, because at some point I found out that that the coal from occupied territories still were coming to Ukrainian government-controlled territories. I met the train. And then we started to dig on this deeper, and then we were interested how oligarchs' business works. And it was possible to do in 2015 and beginning of 2016. But by the end of 2016, I felt that it was possible, I felt less and less possibilities to work there. And in the beginning of 2017, I was said directly that if I would start working on occupied territories, they would keep an eye on me, like meaning that there will be somebody who will go with me physically, which I didn't want to have, and that was a danger. Yeah, and and also they had a lot of workers who tried to control the work. We had such a case with my colleague. He had, at that moment, Russian passport. We came to occupy Debaltseve, in anniversary of Debaltseve. We entered, we were stopped while we were filming delivery of humanitarian aid with Russian flags. We were stopped by the guys with machine guns, and we were moved to local administration. And due to the colleague with Russian passport, he was very open. He said, like, what was going on? And the guy said, I have a person in next room. I need to take his advice. And this colleague said, so it's like, we call them curators, Russian persons who controlled the areas, not military persons anymore, but maybe FSB or somebody like that. And the guy said, yes, we understood that we couldn't use it and we would need to leave the area. But we saw those signs more and more and more. And just before invasion, when in 2021, almost all foreign media were banned from, maybe one media could work, but with many restrictions. I won't mention the name of this media, but I know that they entered the area. But just before invasion, Russia tried to play public, and they gave accreditations to some media, but they put persons who followed those media teams and who checked their footage. And some media, like Canadian media, they mentioned in their footage that we are working under eye of.
Yeah, guys, we should all be speaking into the mic because there's a live stream and people on the internet who are watching, they cannot hear us.
But as for now, it's impossible to work openly. Like, as for me, I asked myself before invasion, would I like to go to occupied territories? And I felt that no, because I feel responsibility because of my son. I have a small child. And I felt that probably I wouldn't be able to go back. Another thing, that it's a full-scale invasion. Russia is not hiding
their presence.
Their presence, and they are just criminals killing people. There is no justification for them, and no need to ask them why they are doing this. It's just a crime.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ina. I wanted just to add a very important fact about our colleagues. There are, according to the Institute of Mass Information, there are 28 civil Ukrainian journalists who are in Russian captivity right now. Some of them, for example, like our colleague Dmitry Khiluk, was kidnapped from his home in Kiev Oblast, from his parents' home. He was not covering well, he was physically he was in the occupied territory of the Kiev Oblast, but he was at home in February, March 2022, and his whereabouts are very dark. He's somewhere in the Russian deep in the Russian territory. Another colleague of ours, Victoria Roshina, has presumably been killed in Russian captivity this year. At least this is a short note that her family received from the Russian Ministry of Defense, that your daughter is dead, and no details, and her body will be exchanged and transported later during the exchange between the sides, nothing else. So this is just a short note to explain what it takes to cover occupation. For Victoria Roshina, it was a case, she was probably the only Ukrainian journalist who was covering the occupation. She got there, she was detained in occupied territories and then later on taken to Russia. Others were here in Ukraine. If you wanted to add something to what...
I have an interesting experience.
Yeah,
I was in Russia in 2014 and in 2016. Nearby the borderline, I had some relatives there, and I want to understand the other side. Try to understand the level of thinking of Russians. Why, we lived before like dozens and dozens of years. They smuggling some stuff through the border. They raised a lot of money, and I try to understand them. Try to find Russian tanks, to be honest. And I have to erase all my... in 2014, I was a known person. I erased all my social media. I was... Yeah, I wrote some piece about that travel. It was interesting. In 2016, I spent a lot of time on the borderline with bodyguards. And I understand that that was my last travel to my relatives to the Russia. Because I spent really a lot of time with their soldiers. Like explaining myself, explaining what I'm doing, why I'm going to the Russia, and the answer is that regular people who saw, like I'm growing up, they told me that we have to kill Ukrainians a long time ago by missiles. It was a little bit terrifying for me because they know that I'm living in Kiev, they know me, and they want to kill me by missiles. That was a little bit, that was terrifying. That's the answer. They can.
I think there's also a long discussion about how propaganda also works. We'll get back to that, but very quickly, I think another important note on how Russia was handling itself as a state in occupied territories during 2014, 2015, and later on, probably until 2022, there were at least some international monitoring missions, like OSCE or UN humanitarian missions, and at least there was a kind of, there was at least someone on those territories with whom you could check, reality. Unlike 2022, when both UN and OSCE left those territories, just left for good, and not only giving Russians the opportunity to do whatever they want to do, they would do anyway, I'm pretty sure, whatever they had on their agenda. But even this small chance for a journalist to be accompanied by someone from, international organizations or having this immunity, diplomatic immunity, things like that, vanished. So these territories indeed turned into not even gray, but dark area with filtration camps and other terrible things. But let me quickly ask you maybe a very simple, but also not so simple question about the lessons learned with the cover, your personal lessons. You all have been covering this war for quite a long time. As a journalist, as a professional, what have you learned? Maybe 2 or 3 things. Go ahead, Anastasia.
Yeah, well, the first lesson is obviously, that the battlefield has changed because of drones, and that we're not going to be able to operate in the same way, to produce same images that we're used to from, these historic events and from the big magnum photographers. Also, I've understood that money is really important in terms of war coverage, because security is crucially important and it costs money. And you can see how much it affects even how much you can do at the front line, because I mean, ideally we should be traveling at the armored vehicle. Ideally we should be working with the security operator who is helping us and only getting our helping us to get the story, but not stopping us from going somewhere if there is no if it's not too dangerous for going. And I mean, also even knowing that your team that's going with you, like if you're a journalist, you have photographer and you have producer, knowing you have driver, knowing that all of you have been to HIFAT courses, ideally that you've done one course together, that you are sure and your colleague that you don't have to be worried that somebody will put Celex in your torso, that knowing these things is also one of the factors that secures you, that makes your work more productive in the end. And it is not cheap, and unfortunately I don't know any Ukrainian media that can afford such level, of security. And also, as a matter of fact, the level of journalism, of war journalism, I mean, it is obviously influenced by that, because also, as Stas said, when we're going somewhere, we don't want to be, we don't want to cause more problems with our presence to the soldiers. So also sneaking in, as used to be the only option in the years before the full scale, is not an option, because you understand that if something happens to you, they're in trouble, and it can slow down things. It can slow down your evacuation if their bosses don't know that you were even there, because even the first 15 minutes is going to be oh shit, oh fuck, nobody knows that they're here, right?
So rules matter.
Rules matter, yeah, because, and I do appreciate it when I see that my colleagues, they know the rules and they take them seriously, because I mean, the fatalism doesn't work in this case, I think, and I mean, I don't like to rely only on my luck. And the objectivity, how we used to see objective reporting, and how we used to see reporting on the conflicts also changed, because now we understand that, there is no way we go to Russia, there is no way we go to occupied territories, because it's it's just a question with one answer. And similarly for the foreign media as well, because they also now are playing by the same rules as we do. And I also, on personal level, I've understood that our job is also about habit, with habits, you have to also keep it up. Otherwise, because we all live in this, in the same country, and we all, we speak about people with their issues, but we also have our own issues, and pretty much everyone is affected by the war. So it's if before the full scale there were some people whose lives weren't affected by war at all, now it's really hard to find, I think, a Ukrainian whose life hasn't been affected by war. And it's hard to always stay, sane and to keep working. And I think that, having understanding this fact that documenting is also a habit, that you might not have, you might not have energy or resource to write down something, to take an image, but you kind of understand, it becomes part of you, and you understand that you're also, a character of your story, and it's something that you can just get used to it, but it's never gonna, be a part of our life.
Thank you so much. We'll talk about, by the way, surviving practices and resistance, advices for later. Misha had his hand first. I'll hand the mic to him.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The lessons I learned may sound obvious, actually, but I really had come to these thoughts. First things, facts really matter, and information really matters, because I've started working as a journalist since 2003 or 2004, really long time ago. But only since 2014 I understood that when you are covering war, facts do really matter, and people are really interested in what is going on. Second one, what is regular to you may be quite sensational to those who are not so deeply into the topic. That was my personal lesson when I talked to some foreign journalists who started covering war in 2022, and they could not understand that people were covering that since 2014. We're going to the front line since 2014. We're under artillery fire since 2014. And it was like a big thing for them, and quite unfortunately regular thing for some of reporters in Ukraine. But since 2022, I understood that you need to focus actually on what matters for your audience and not what matters for you, because that's how you can actually get your attention from them. That's the second one. And the third one, I would not agree that you can cover war staying at home, despite all the tragedies we have. I'm sure that you have to be as near to the site as possible. It may be dangerous. I totally envy the team with security advisors and all armored vehicles and all stuff. But when you are near...
You're polarizing. I didn't say it from home.
No, security advisor and the whole stuff.
I'm talking about that you compare like not being in the trench, not being close, but yeah. I'm saying that you're polarizing it too much. It's not like you're covering it from home or you're covering it from the trench sitting near the soldier. It's like, you know, if your images are not good enough, then probably you're not close enough, but also like, I think now we're at the stage of, but if your images are still not good enough, maybe you just need to step aside a few steps. So I think that it's like, you know, it's like another challenge, and it's not about covering war from home, which is also can be an interesting conceptual idea if somebody's like, you know, photographing, like Gary Winograd photographed news from the TV, the color TV in the 80s, and it became it became a huge project. So I'm not denying an option that you cannot cover war from home, but also I just wanted to clarify that I didn't mean that you don't go to the front line and you don't go to, like, you know, places of the potential danger, but you just being not too crazy.
Let's give Misha opportunity to make his point.
Yeah.
It's Misha, it's your point,
no,
so
no,
it's fine if we disagree.
I love it. It's dialogue, actually, not a monologue. No, it's really interesting, and it's a good point. It's my personal stuff. Like, you need to be as close as possible. During last 2 years, actually, I had to stay away from the front lines due to some personal stuff. So I had to somehow cover war, not from the trenches, literally, but to look for some aspects. And what I was saying is, I've never actually worked as a team with security advisor. I don't know how it works like, how it looks like. And never been to the armored vehicle. Unfortunately, I loved to have some of them at some point. But that's just some personal experience I learned. That's all I think.
Thank you, Oksana.
Yeah. I would divide into practical aspects and mental aspects personally. Yeah. So practical is definitely its experience working under severe artillery fire, because I've been to more than 100 countries, very often in the conflict zones, worked a lot in Africa, and managed to go through different international courses, but still like learning the tactics of survival in the real big war. It's only happened in Ukraine in the last 3 years. Second point, it's definitely the importance of the tactical medicine, TACMED. So I even finished the full course and became a paramedic because it's so important, because I work a lot in the trenches at the front line, and I had cases where myself directly need to give first assistance, first help. And of course, the war is it's very then it takes a lot of money to cover it. So in the first years, and now I even put a lot of my personal sources to finance this and to go to the front line to cover the aspects and the stories I really want to right away, not waiting for the task. But on the mental level, first of all, that's the war taught me like absolute acceptance of people's weaknesses, passions, flaws, because I saw so much grief so closely, profoundly, like under a microscope. So it really taught me this. And being from Lugansk, thinking a lot about the situation that has happened, maybe having more than 100 hours of interviews with the people from Donbas region, because I really wanted to understand how come this could happen in my country. Second, it's never postpone anything. Really, it's become like in my mentality, because I lost home second time, as you mentioned, first in Lugansk 10 years ago, then right on the New Year, Shaheds hit my house, right on the New Year morning. So I lost home second time, and now I'm in the middle of the moving, because the state of the house is critical. And third, it would be really doing things as quickly as possible. Again, some mental thing that I developed for the rest of my life, I believe, and saying directly everything. I think I was always this way, but that became as part of the mindset, because you really think, what if tomorrow the conditions would be totally different? This person would die, my house would be hit, this story won't be relevant anymore. So I try to publish everything, to do everything as quickly as possible, even with the friends, with the family, with the personal tasks, complete the change of mindset.
Thank you for sharing this.
I wanted to quickly add about postponing. What changed? I started sending images of assault brigade fighters to them first, before the editor even, because I understand that sometimes it might be too late. Also, I wanted to emphasize, and I already spoke about security, but and about HIFAD, but it is important to do your own security, even if you have the security operator, if you don't have him, because when Misha was talking about not working with not having this experience, I thought that sometimes when journalists are used to work with security operator, and I witnessed that from foreign colleagues, they become too relaxed because they think that the security operator will keep them safe, while you should still be able to do your own security, because I've worked with different security operators, with good, with bad, with just better not to be there. And I would say that that's why it's better to know to have a person in your team, but if you don't, well, obviously you need to do your own security.
During the summer attack in Kramatorsk, the security officer of Reuters was killed, and our friend and colleague Vanya was heavily injured. And the security officer, yes, he was killed during the. There is no morale in this story. It's just that everyone is under danger.
And it's not that, because most of I spoke to many colleagues after this happened, and their outtake mostly was it already, so basically the hit already happened, security got killed, and so the job is done, basically, no need to do why do you, well, you understand what I'm talking about.
What lesson
basically,
do you have
what else can you do? It already happened. While there is such a huge important part of job, which is evacuation. After the heat has happened, and that is why it's it doesn't end. Your knowledge of security doesn't end when at the moment of heat, but it ends when you bring your colleague to the hospital.
Absolutely, there's a circle of everything in our work, and it never. We will talk also about that. It never stops, and then we also have to live with that.
Just a very quick note again about the costs of the coverage. The fact that there is less and less media in Ukraine, this factor also plays a huge role. Not every newsroom can afford itself to send journalists to Ukraine, pay for insurance, for hotels, for security, and just merely for the coverage. In 2014, then 15, 16, until 2022, we used to travel to Donbass like on our own with the camera and your own West, maybe.
And by marshrutka, right?
Yes. And
directly to positions. It sometimes happens.
no, really. But now you have to take gas with you. You have to take water. You have to take Starlink. You have to take like literally everything, because before 2022, there were towns where you could get everything and stay in a hotel. Now in Donbass, there is no town that could serve as a base for you, right? So the only town that you can probably go is the biggest is Dnipro, but Kramatorsk is also kind of. Yes, with the situation in Pokrovsk that used to be that base is almost now gone as a place, you know, for yourself just to stay shortly and at least have a rest. Yes, lessons learned, Ina.
As I said, I had a lot of questions, and I wanted to see what was going on when the war started, why, and so on. But then I had more and more questions. At some point, we should put the mark, when should we stop and when should we go out to keep our sanity. Yeah, and that's the main rule of my coverage, and keeping the profession standards helps me to work in the area. But from the other side, I think that the main thing is just to be a human. And this morale is above the standards, and it's much higher than standards. And none of the editors can teach me. At some point, I found out that I didn't need advices, and some of editors didn't have such an experience that I did. And the choice was only on me. And the main thing is just to be a human. The coverage when the war... when the military actions reduce, it's more complicated, but you should be more empathic to people. From one side, it's easier when you're local because we share the same experience. From another side, we are more vulnerable because, for example, there was aftermath and we came to see if it's possible to cover, and we found out that it was military factory and we were not allowed. But one of the guys came, I think he was from security, and he said, well, when somebody in your family will die, you will understand. And I said him, fuck you, because colleagues know. Because the rudeness shouldn't control the situation. And I can be empathic, but other people also should respect me. What the war taught us, as a journalist, I can sacrifice my material if it will break somebody's life. And sometimes I even explain this to people. It happened even more often on occupied territories. Because even some very light, simple stories could destroy somebody's life. And sometimes it even happened. Despite we discussed with people, they knew what could happen, but there was their choice. So sometimes we have to step back, or in case of, it was not in Ukraine, but it was also a dangerous situation. We investigated Protasevich case, the Belarusian journalist.
Well, he used to be a journalist.
While all the media reported about him that during the first week of his detention, I put months on investigation. I tracked everything that he did in Ukraine. But at the end, checking with his lawyers, I understood that there would be a deal and we would destroy his life if we will start talking about him again. and I just passed some documents to his lawyers and stopped working on this. I stepped back.
I see. So probably the main lesson learned, I don't know, when I'm asked by other colleagues and also foreign colleagues, like how your rules and standards changed, I think the rule number one is do no harm.
Yeah.
This is like, how do you know when you should go for the story, or when there's like military censorship, you should not cover this? Sometimes it's just mere common sense. If you do harm to, and you just stop, you just need to stop.
Another thing that journalism, it's a huge field, and we have so many things to learn, and we have so many things so many ways how to show, how to work. We can work in covering news, we can make documentaries, like we can change the perspectives. And like in the beginning, I was mostly working on news coverage, and it seems that I have high-level standards. But when it comes to personal, I should say open that it's personal and work on this like on a personal story. So we learned how to divide facts and personal.
Thank you. Stas, your lessons learned.
Always have your breakfast. That's the main thing.
And
for example, we covered the story about Avdiivka in 2015, and we had breakfast with my colleague at maybe 8 on the evening. It was terrible. The second thing, that you're person in charge, that whole decisions that you make, it's only your response. If you're uncomfortable, you resign, because that journalist never filed. Or never filing, I don't know.
And have woolen socks in Ukraine. It's really cold on the field. Really,
Yeah.
sometimes I have 2 pairs on me.
Yeah.
I also have always a pair of socks.
You always will have the people on the ground, because this situation changing every day, to be honest, and you have to understand what's going on. Because if, for example, you've been somewhere, for example, in Pokrovsk, 6 months ago, everything changed. If you've been, I don't know, somewhere in Kramatorsk months ago, everything could be changed from that time. You always have to clarify it. I saw the guys who always choosing the huge vehicles, like huge armored cars. That's the target. You will have this, not the small car, but the gray, like the gray car. And you never, ever will stop in the hotels right now. Because the hotels are the targets for Russia, for Russian army. You always have to find some kind of little tiny house or a little apartment on the edge of the city, far from the front line. And maybe the last lesson, lay down, and after that you will understand what's going on. Sometimes it's saving your lives, to be honest.
We're hardly at the half of the questions that I have.
I wanted to add to,
and
like,
everyone wants
yes.
to end, and that's fine. And it's just we will soon need to open our floor to the audience. So I'll be quick, and I won't be asking other questions that I have about the ethics, what we have learned about the self-censorship. I'm saying that because maybe you want to add something about that. Nastya, you had a remark. Go ahead.
I wanted to just say that Stas was saying that if you've been like somewhere months ago, don't trust even your yesterday's experience, I would say. Even like if you've been somewhere yesterday and it's been good, like you cannot be sure that it's going to be the same today. So that's how hard it is. In terms of censorship, I think that it's also like about this topic about that Ina already spoke in terms of not harming, right? And and also what changed in my work is that usually even if the person is okay with being photographed with the face showing the identity, but if the topic is kind of controversial, and I understand that, I would still do 2 variants. I would do showing the face, and I would do hiding their identity. And for this recent story for The Guardian, when I photographed the guy who left the who
Left service. Yeah.
The deserter. The guy was totally fine with showing his face. He was not, well, it was his decision, but still we prefer to do two variants, and the editors at The Guardian decided that they're going with the hiding identity variant. And I really respect that decision. I think it's, well, one of the good cases of how the editors also well, think about stories, about how they also empathize to people who are heroes of the materials. And yeah, I think I would suggest doing always two versions, because, you know, later some detail might appear, and yeah.
I just wanted, thanks for keeping up the topic of do no harm. When Inna mentioned that the first time, I thought that it has a very imminent risk in this intention. It sounds great, and I can totally understand that and totally support that in some conditions. The principle, do no harm. It sounds great. But I remembered the thing which actually struck me about maybe a year or a little bit more time ago, when we first met with the problems of those who didn't want to serve in the army and those who wanted to leave the country no matter what. That topic was widely discussed in social media, and it was widely discussed in just in the society. But I didn't see any media pieces on that topic in Ukrainian media. And the first media who actually broke this, I don't know, wall of silence were Deutsche Welle and New York Times, which made big pieces on people who didn't want to serve, who ran away from Ukraine, who died during this process of fleeing away. And I understand that this topic is very sensitive to a big piece of Ukrainian community, but from my point of view, not talking about such problems, because we don't want to do any harm, may lead to the situation when actually New York Times or Deutsche Welle does this material.
I disagree, because there were media, Ukrainian media, who covered this, and there is only the point how to make it more safe to the protagonist of material. It's not about prohibiting the topic. It's about the way how to make it more safe to the protagonist.
I don't think there's a direct link, Misha. I don't think there's a direct link between the rule "do no harm" and specifically this topic. Because my next question is about the topics that need more coverage, and I really wanted to hear what topics you think might need more coverage in Ukraine and also abroad. If you could be short with that, because we really lack time. Could we? Sorry, you wanted to.
I'll just clarify about what I said earlier, and I'll give floor to somebody else. I'm saying not about the specific characters who ran away or specific characters who died. I'm speaking about the covering of the whole problem. Possibly there were media pieces in Ukrainian media. I didn't see any big ones. I saw only New York Times and Deutsche Welle, which were really big and really substantial.
Yeah, it's a painful topic, and I also think it's not like a topic number one among Ukrainian media. Absolutely. So my question to you is: what topics, what stories need more coverage, or are they just somewhere under the radars?
Long-term stories. You know, we made a lot of stories about what, for example, we made a lot of stories that what Russians did in occupied territories. We made the personal stories about persons who were detained or who escaped from Russian occupation. But to be honest, I didn't saw a lot of stories that explaining the system. Explaining the system, how people detained on occupied territories after that moved to the Belarus or Russia, after that maybe tried or not, how that people moved, how many people moved from occupied territories to the Russian territories. I understand why, because that took a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of people have to be involved on that process. And maybe that's the main topic for me right now, because you want to explain what's going on. And that's not the regular Ivan from Russian army, that's the system. And you want to explain that system, because I saw the same things in Kyiv Oblast, Chernihiv Oblast, Sumy Oblast, Kherson Oblast, to be honest, Kharkiv Oblast. They have the same stuff there. And you want to explain that stuff, but you haven't time, you haven't money, you haven't resources, but international media have. But international media want to make the stories like fast stories, because it's more, I don't know, more simple.
Thank you. So understanding how
That's
Russian,
my opinion.
How Russian occupation works, right? And basically in the field.
In general, how the system works. Like not only about Russian occupation, but for example, Russian, I don't know, Russian mobilization. Or
Indoctrination.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Stas. Misha, you want to add or?
I'm thinking.
Okay. Inna, the stories and topics that are undercovered.
Well, there are still a lot of things to cover in an unexpected way. For example, before last Trump news, we would report more about war crimes and so on. But now, we think that international court could be affected with Trump story and so on. And what to do? Should we report about war crimes? I mean, it's that editors could think. But let's take a look on this story from the other angle. For example, ecocide. Let's try to calculate the costs of war in real money. For example, forests. How much it costed to Ukraine to grow up the forest, and is it possible to get any money from burnt forest right now? And that could be a nice business story. And I haven't seen such a story yet. Another scene, I'm afraid to tell that because probably somebody would do this story.
You're pitching the stories of.
By the way, I was very, very angry once. Foreign journalist from New York Times, photographer. He was a bit drunk and said, well, maybe you, like a local, maybe you have a story that you haven't covered yet, but I can cover. And I was like, but anyway, I have a lot of ideas, and I know that I have different angles.
It's not about ideas. It's something that you feel is lacking, in the media space. That it's out there, but not in the media. Something that you think needs to be covered.
Simple stories, because to be honest, society is tired of strong-built stories. If we read about war crimes, it's the strongest and the worst war crime. I would like to read a story about not a clear war crime, and it's a tragedy for a family, because there...
What was the story I can send you about a mother...
That's the story. Sorry. We need no time. We'll share.
There are just only
the...
a few who did this. Mm-hmm. And as a journalist, when I read books about wars, there is, the concentrated pain, and I can't read it anymore. And I understand the society can't read it anymore. They would like to read about normal, regular humans, or not such a concentrated pain, because it doesn't bring them reading this. It doesn't make them reading this story because they want to see something different. I don't know. About elderly couples who evacuate from war zones. I met the couple who spent 55 years together. They are Bulgarians. They have Bulgarian, they're not Bulgarians themselves, but they have relatives Bulgarians, and those relatives called them and asked it wasn't Pokrovsk, and they asked them to leave, and they said, we love you, and they left. And I would like to read the story. It's Valentine's Day, about this couple, how they will support them. He has Alzheimer, but she is still healthy, how she will take care about him. That would be a strong story to follow them. Maybe I will do. Or you can find such a couple. Just find another angle in those stories. And many people will read this. Another thing is we have a lot of stories about Russians, Russian prisoners of war. They are in good conditions and so on. But I would like to read about Ukrainians and even more about 18-year-old Ukrainians who are forced to fight on occupied territories. And it's not so hard maybe to find them because when they are imprisoned on the battlefield, they go to prison and maybe it's possible to find them even, or it's possible to find in social media and track such people. So that's kind of ideas which I haven't seen or I have saw maybe just a few.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for pitching lots of ideas here in this hall. Thank you. I hope everyone is taking notes. Oksana.
Yeah,
yes.
I believe the most overlooked topic is covering the journey of the people who are living the war, wounded soldiers, first of all. For the last 2 years, I've been sharing my time between the front lines and the hospitals. And covering these stories in different sectors gives you the best understanding of the system and us as a society, because that's the reality we will be facing for next decades. For example, I still don't know any story about a soldier being in palliative care, for example, yeah, and how the family faced this. I have this story by myself, still not published, but that's totally changes the life of the family of the wife that's becoming a nurse and how the system works. Do we help this family? And the answer is now it's very weak system. It's very pity reality. Then, for example, the soldiers that got paralyzed, and you explore through this prism, again, the structure of the system, of the help, of the medical approach, and of course the future of the family, how they're going to live. Recently, only the amputees got better coverage thanks to the Superhuman Center, for example, put in big efforts in the media. But for the last 10 years, 11 years of the war, these topics were completely overlooked and the system did not work. Now working regularly every month in the hospitals, I was in all key hospitals, in all the best rehabilitation centers. You see the stories and they are the best reflection of the society. They are raising extremely important topics and you see them so little, just like you can really count those stories. Mm-hmm. But these topics I mentioned, I can't recall any story on them still.
I do recall several strong stories, but I absolutely agree they are completely overlooked. We need more because thousands and thousands of stories like that in Ukraine. Thank you so much. Nastya, yeah, just a second.
Go ahead,
Nastya, yes.
Okay. I thought you were just a second. Well, I don't have answer to this question, but I think that if you feel personal interest to the story, that's the best story to cover, because it has to, I think best stories, the most interesting stories, they come from the personal interest of the journalist and from their own will to find out how it's going on, what's going on and stuff like that. I'm definitely a bit sick and tired of stories from trenches, to be honest, because, I mean, let's be honest, soldiers will always say the same because they have limitations of what to say, and they're always tired, they're always lacking of ammunition, and it's always going to be a story. And yeah, it can be dangerous for them if they say something that was supposed to be off the record, but you publish it. So I'm supporting Ina at this with talking to simple people, asking them questions, and and reflecting yourself, I would say, because sometimes we forget that we are not these aliens that are alienated to somebody's lives. We go through the same problems, same processes, and don't underestimate your personal experiences.
Thank you. And the soldiers are part of the society.
Yeah.
The same
But when
simple
they're
people.
at service, they are
Of course, they are in a special
limited
position
to what they can say, and
absolutely.
it can harm them.
No, I get your point. Misha, very shortly.
Yeah, very shortly. When Oksana was speaking about soldiers who are in palliative care or someone else, I thought that we have quite a big quantity of materials about soldiers in Ukrainian media, happily. But I thought that possibly it could be a good idea for European media, especially in the neighboring countries, to make stories about Ukrainian soldiers who actually were not soldiers before. I mean, like 1 million people is serving in the army, and I think that for European audience it would be interesting to see how a person who was working, I don't know, a manager in the shop, a barber in the barber shop, a barista, anyone else, and who had actually to become a soldier, and who had actually to mastermind those new skills for him and how his life changed. Because if we want to say that Ukrainian-Russian war is actually a part of Russia-Europe, like tenses, it means that possibly civilian people in Europe may be a next target for Russian regime. And it could be a nice picture to show that these are regular people who are trying to stop Russian invasion.
Thank you so much. I think it's a great point to open up our discussion for the floor, because I wanted to ask you about the resilience practices, but I think most of you have said something about it. So let's hear our colleagues. Please go ahead. Could you please introduce yourself?
Oh.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Extremely interesting, super interesting. Thank you so much. My name is Mario from Spain, El Periódico de España. I have like 1,000 questions, but I will keep it in 2, very quick. Is there any government censorship or law or regulation you have to follow, especially if you are embedded in the army? Do you have to follow any censorship procedures after the coverage? And about the number of people killed in this conflict, do you use any figure, any estimation? Are there any rules that forbid, I don't know, an estimation of those figures? Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Wants to take this question?
maybe I start and we'll continue. Yeah, to be honest, we haven't the huge censorship like in a World War II time or whatever. As usual, you have to check your stuff with the local press officer. As usual, that's the video or photo. Sometimes they asking about codes. If you've spoken with commanders, sure, you have to check it with the commanders and their commanders. We haven't the special government ministry of censorship or whatever. We have some problems with 73 наказ?
Да, наказ, ruling number 73 by the chief commander.
Yeah.
Basically, it's military censorship. We do have military censorship.
And the story is that it depends from the people on the ground, because if you try to follow these 73 stuff, you never will make your story, because it's unreal. And yeah, sometimes people on the ground understand it, sometimes not. And I think that's the main problem right now. Maybe.
No?
Well, of course we have the laws. By the way, we had a great discussion in Spain about the same questions that you mentioned. Unfortunately, you were not there. But I will repeat. As for losses, we decided to keep the line that there are official numbers, and we are publishing official numbers. And to be honest, it's almost impossible to calculate it not officially. I mean, there is no NGOs who have all the database. So we can show the cemeteries, we take photos of them, and we definitely can say that the number of losses, it's been increasing and increasing. But we do not have the real number. And we say this, that we do not have real number. We have some official numbers, but also when the president says that 45,000.
30 over 30,000, but it's what Zelensky said a year ago.
No, 45. The fresh
40,
number.
45?
Yeah, the
No.
fresh number is 45,000.
That's the fresh one. The one that he said in February 2024 was 30.
So as for now, it's 45,000 of killed. Also, he mentioned number of injured, but he didn't mention the number of missing people. And we say this, that it seems that we do not know how many, because among those missing, there can be prisoners of war, and there can be killed people, killed soldiers. So we do not have the exact number.
So maybe they are hiding somewhere. Like,
there are some deserters as well.
no, I mean on occupied territories, for example.
Maybe,
we have
we do not
few
know.
stories like that too, yeah.
We do not know, but it's not possible yet to give this real number right now, but we are not on the governmental side trying to hide something. We are marking this, like, you know, in our materials, that we do not know the real number, despite the president said. And we wonder too, how many. As for censorship, as for this 73rd rule, we had discussions with military people. We have those discussions from time to time again, and we are pushing to get more possibilities to work. Sometimes we manage to do this, sometimes not. Sometimes it works on personal links only, and we are trying to avoid censorship. But yes, of course, it exists somehow. But it's much better than in Israel, definitely. But yes, there are some...
Can I quickly add? I think it's important to... there are some very simple things, like how do we cover daily attacks, missile attacks or drone attacks. There is a rule in that order, number 73, that you cannot cover the aftermath of the attack 3 hours after a civilian.
You can cover, you can't publish. You can go there immediately.
Not cover, publish. Publish. Publish information about the aftermath of an attack 3 hours after the civilian. If it's a civilian object, and 12 hours if it's a military object. But the practice is that we publish information. The information about it becomes available almost immediately. After the officials, like local officials, municipal officials, or military, post information about it, we regard this ban to be, taken off. So we, of course, we publish. And quite often, when it's a civilian object, it's almost always an immediate breaking news story, and there's a post by all of the branches of power. So it's not like we formally wait for them to confirm. We need to do that according to this order number 73, right? But of course, when something happens, the journalists are there right away. The only, I think, rule that everyone of us adheres is live streaming. So we do not live stream from the place where an attack has happened.
For minutes for the Russian ballistic missiles.
Yeah. Plus, there is another like reality for us, double taps, like a double attack that takes place sometimes within 20 minutes after the first attack, sometimes within 40 minutes, especially in Kharkiv. It's a very widespread tactic. So many of our crews wait at least 1 hour after the first attack, and then they go and cover, just to make sure that the crew is not got under attack by the double tap, by the second attack.
I'd like to add something very shortly, because the censorship is a very sensitive thing. If we are speaking about censorship in the Second World War military style, like when governmental officials read everything which is being published, it's not like that at all. You are speaking to the reporters at the moment, and we are speaking about the rules how to cover on site. But no one reads the text on all Ukrainian media before it's printed, and it doesn't have to be governmentally approved to print a text or an op-ed or anything like that in Ukrainian media. I just wanted to emphasize.
And also there is a way how to work with, how to stand against censorship. We understand from some safety reasons we can't publish it right now, but as a documentalist, we can cover and keep it in our archive. And in many cases, we are allowed to do this. And when I work for a news agency, I work for Reuters as well now, and I never blur stuff. And when I come to the place, and if there is a responsible person, like a press officer or officer, I ask what I'm not allowed to show, because I won't blur it. And I work from that angle to hide, for example, it's not allowed now to publish the numbers on shells. So my task is to film from that angle, which do not show the sign on shell. So there are ways how to play with this censorship.
And plus, I think there's quite strong self-regulation among Ukrainian media when it comes to the rules. On one hand, there is a dialogue between the military, the government, and the media community, and there is a kind of a internal discussion among media, like what did we do wrong, and like shame the colleagues who did it wrong. It's a very, a very popular practice in Ukraine. There was a hand, yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Christo. I'm from Bulgaria. Unfortunately, my question is really close to what Mario asked. So if you feel like we've spent too much time talking about censorship, you could be short. But I wanted to give you like an example. Would you cover this type of story, and how would you cover it if you would? Let's just say that at the place where you're staying, you have very good leads that there's a commander who is constantly drunk, or corrupted in some way, or in some measurable way incompetent and causing the lives of Ukrainian soldiers. Would you cover such a story? How would you cover it? And if you do cover it, are there going to be consequences for you? Like,
we have
maybe,
story.
guys, maybe not all of you, but let's decide who one or two, okay, answers, because we
have the story already covered about it. Hromadski done it.
Also keep independent about the foreign legion.
Yeah, there was a story. Well, there was a few stories covered, but I was mentioning the Kyiv Independent story that did about Foreign Legion. Anna Mironuk did it. They had troubles after it, but luckily they managed. Well, not luckily. It was also it was also good that they managed. They persuaded the soldiers. Well, not the soldiers. The press office who they had issues with that. Well, it's an important thing to talk about, and basically they managed to return, because when it just came out, they stripped Anna of accreditation, but after a couple of talks, Olga Rudenko, as I know, and other editors, they managed to persuade the press officers that it's not the way that they should be dealing with critique, and that basically well, it's not Anna's fault that that this story that was so disgraceful happened, but it's basically well, yeah, it's about the dealing with the consequences, but not about dealing with the journalists. So I would say
I don't think the colleagues understand what story you're talking about. Could you just
there was
very shortly just what's it about?
It was just as you explained. There was this guy called Sanya, who was the commander of the Foreign Legion, and who was basically encouraging looting, who was drunk, who was with some really shady past, not even connected to the military, and that basically the soldiers from the Foreign Legion, they were themselves not once contacting the army officials, asking them to change something, and then they were even contacting the president's office, and they themselves did this the Foreign Legion soldiers, they did investigation of their own. They spoke like with soldiers who were fighting with this commander. And so like they had their own home task done, and they were already like sending it to the president's office. And when none of the official institutions solved it, they just decided to go to journalists. And like obviously I was the English language media, and the story came out.
So there are stories like that. It's not like I probably think your question is about self-censorship, whether we have problem like that, and if someone wants
if you try to follow Ukrainian social media, you will see that every week I think that journalists spoken about the commanders on the front lines, on which way they using people on the right way or on the wrong way, and sometimes situation changing after that, discussions.
Yeah, I think it's also our work to make it change.
Just give examples of these kind of stories, because it was in Ukrainska Pravda 2 types of stories. One about how some commanders or soldiers beat the soldiers in the unit because they are drunk. It was a huge discussion if they have right or not to do that, and another discussion what can be done with drunk soldiers inside the army, because it's a huge risk to the unit also. And it was a second publication about problem with alcohol inside Ukrainian army, and what can be done. And it's like not very pleasant, not first story, not second story, for if we talk about governmental policy.
And I think there is quite
one important thing that about self-censorship when Ukrainian journalists cover the war, it's like you don't want to hide problems inside army, because a lot of people which are in this army, and they suffer from these problems. And if you will hide these problems, a lot of your friends will suffer from that. And it's better to show these problems than to keep silence about that.
A very pragmatic reason.
I wanted to say that I noticed that because these kind of stories, they're more like domestic stories, because there's something like that you report on first and foremost to have change, right? And that is why people from the foreign world, because these stories don't usually end up in foreign media because they're too domestic, think that we are not, covering them. But the truth is that we do cover them. It's just like you need to know Ukrainian, you need to know like Slidstvo, Bihus, Hromadske, Kyiv Independent, all the medias that do investigative work, to follow them. But usually like for foreigners, because they don't see many of such stories in the foreign publication.
Probably that's also the reason.
We are really running out of time. I will suggest we have one more question.
One last
more question, and then we can proceed in the hall. We will have some snacks and lemonades there.
There was a hand, I think, in a lady. Oh yeah, sorry.
I
you had
try to be very fast. My name is Francesco Martino. I'm an Italian journalist working and living in Bulgaria. My question is related to what you mentioned several times, the importance of economic resources to produce good reporting. To my knowledge, especially when it comes to investigative journalism in Ukraine, a major player was the American cooperation, USAID in specific. It seems that these funds are going to be frozen. And I wanted to know, according to you, what kind of consequences, how and in which ways this will impact journalism and reporting in Ukraine. Thank you.
The main problem, I think, that for the local medias, because they really depend from that, you say it's money. Because I know a lot of good local media, like in Sumy region and Donetsk region. Yeah, the regional media, not the local, sorry. the regional media, little tiny one. Because they haven't money. And for example, for your understanding, the salary or the payment for 1 month for the staff could be $250. That's not a lot. and they lost that money right now. And the bigger Ukrainian central media could survive, I think, because they can manage that stuff. But yeah, that's the main problem for local medias.
Just a short one. We had, just before that meeting, I actually saw on the news that the court backslashed the arrest for the funds you're talking about. So the executive order was on pause about freezing the USAID assets, and so the court says to go ahead with the money spending. So maybe we have some good news on that.
I wanted to add, I wanted to say, do you think our soldiers will stop fighting if America cuts the financing? No, and I think that we're not soldiers, but with journalism it's also service, because there are jobs to which you commit, and I think that it's the same. Like, even knowing that funds are not going to be the same, some jobs you cannot just stop doing because of that.
Thank you. Okay, we ran out of time, and we still have an opportunity to talk to each other, right there in that neighboring room. Thank you so much. Thank you for your work. Stay safe, please, and thank you for your questions. Thank you.